Welcome, Javron. It's obviously rather a nerve-wracking day. I'm sure I've got my some websites open to check how things are going in different parts of the world, and that's very understandable. Hopefully, we can have the session here where we can take your mind off what's happening on a different continent, and we can talk about more positive and productive things. We'll just start with welcome to country.
Traditional custodians of Macquarie University land, the Warramargal clan of the Darug Nation, whose cultures and customs have nurtured this land since the Dreamtime. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future. We welcome people of all nations and all faiths. Kwai Bidja, Jamna Payala Janawi. Come here, we speak together. We have 60,000 years of archaeological evidence of Aboriginal habitation at Lake Mungo and 20,000 years in Ryde. We have great antiquity. Today, hundreds of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people graduate from Macquarie University. The Darug Nation had famous leaders such as Chief Yarramundi, Naraginji, Colby and Maria Locke. Many of the descendants of these Darug people live today amongst you. We celebrate with you our ongoing attachment and custodianship of this country. We celebrate the achievements of Macquarie University.
Thank you very much, Gingerly, for that. I've been at Macquarie for a couple of years now, and when I started working with the Widening Participation Unit, I was really struck by the network of and really an extensive web of work with partners across the university and with a number of external organizations, and that's still continuing. I mean, we do a lot of collaborations with non-profit organizations. Last year we had the Country Education Foundation Australia came in to talk to this group. They work on scholarships for rural students. Today Roberta Grimmel's here, I see, as attending our meeting, which is great to see. They do a lot of work with lots of different equity groups. We do collaboration with other universities, so we work with a number of different research projects through the National Centre for Student Equity in Higher Education, which includes some collaboration on things like refugee students, college students, pathways for equity students, and those involve lots of collaborations with other universities, UNSW, UTS, UWA, Wollongong, lots of different universities. And it's one of the great things about this sector that there is so much goodwill, there is so much collaboration that goes on, there is so much cooperation rather than competition. We also do a lot with groups right across Macquarie, and we're so grateful for the people in Macquarie groups and individuals. Just an example, the mentoring programs, how they're organized by different faculty groups, different groups across the faculties, and they rely on the goodwill of academics and staff members right across the university to get that support to students who need that. And we have other relationships with individual academics like Mark Williams, Prashant, Julian Smith, who do a lot of work to present, talk to students, lots of ways to facilitate the work that we do. And today, I mean, we've got three presenters who are going to talk about the ways in which these networks can be really important for the work that they do, and how those can really benefit other people that we're trying to help. And our second speaker today is somebody that we started working with as part of another collaboration with other universities, where the Widening Participation Unit is working with two other universities, UTS and UNSW, on literacy skills project with schools across Western Sydney, high schools across Western Sydney. And Saskia Conan has been from the Reading Clinic, has been involved as part of that Equity Consortium work that we're doing. And please, hoping that she's ready to talk to us now. Thanks, Saskia.
Thank you. Before I start, might it be easier if I share my screen so I get to kind of change the slides?
That's probably a really good idea.
Okay, here we go. Yes, so thank you, Stuart and Carolina, for giving me the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing over the last little while. And while I'm speaking, there are other people who are taking very active roles and leading some of these aspects. And I'll talk a little bit more later about how the team comes together and what we bring. But what I've been invited to talk about today is what we call Imagine Futures, which is our work that is aiming at widening participation, and that is through a literacy piece where we are working on increasing high school students' ability to make meaning from text. And I wanted to start by looking at a little bit at the data. I don't think it's news to any of us that there is a link between literacy attainment or literacy skills and disadvantage, but I just wanted to remind us all of some of the current data. And interestingly, only a couple of days ago, I don't know if many of you heard this, it was kind of a news piece around some data from Macklin and Pilcher, only just published, and that reports that in 2018, about just under 13% of 15-year-olds in Australia didn't meet or exceed international standards in maths, reading and science, which is a really, it's a shocking number. This is about the ability for basic meaning making from use that and to understand and use that information. This is another, this also links in with some data from the Grattan Institute, where we see that year 3 students who actually do well, by the time they're in year 9, if they go to a disadvantaged school, are about 2.5 years behind year 3 students who did the same, did as well in year 3 and are now in the high advantage schools. This may be partly to do with the fact that there are huge shortcomings in terms of materials and teachers. And in fact, unfortunately, Australia is doing worse than any other OECD country. Again, this is data published by the Grattan Institute. And I think also linking in with that and getting a little bit closer to the piece that we are doing in our, small contribution in this context is that many countries report that about twice the number of students from advantaged homes consider higher education compared to those from disadvantaged home. And I know that some of you know these data much more intimately than I do, but this is just to set a little bit of the context of the work that we're doing. And those numbers I find are really depressing and alarming and really calling for some action. And so towards improvement, there are a couple of pieces at work that we're doing here at Macquarie University. And I wanted to start with one piece that I know is happening across the university and obviously also in other places as well, but just highlighting the work at Macquarie here. Obviously, one piece that's really important is high quality teaching. So by delivering high quality teaching, we can importantly increase student outcome. And so one of the entities at Macquarie that's engaged at this work is the Macquarie University Reading Clinic, which I lead, and I just wanted to showcase a little bit of the work that we do and then how it links in with the Equity Consortium and the Widening Participation Unit. So the clinic is led by researchers who are engaged with the science of reading, and we deliver theory-based assessments where we work with children, adolescents and adults who have reading and spelling difficulties. And we offer intervention to these children, adolescents and adults. We run about 4,000 intervention sessions a year with our highly trained and skilled clinicians. It's an interdisciplinary team. We have teachers, psychologists, speech and language therapists, and interestingly, we have actually always delivered our services both as a live stream service, so via Zoom, and we used to use Skype and FaceTime and so on. And we've done this since the inception of the clinic, but you can imagine that this has become incredibly important over this year due to COVID, because it allowed us a very easy transition to continue to service our clients and deliver our services into their homes. So for a little while there, 100% of our students were accessing the live streamed interventions and also assessments, where it's usually maybe about 75%. Our services at the clinic also include professional developments for people who are working, professionals working with children, adolescents and adults with reading and spelling difficulties. And it's really part of this work that forms the piece that is part of the network with the Widening Participation Unit that we are contributing. And by delivering this professional development, we are contributing to creating capacity on the ground, so that that the learnings that people gain from the professional development workshops can be put in place in the schools, in their clinics, and so on. Unfortunately, our service actually attracts a fee, and of course we know that difficulties with literacy are overrepresented in disadvantaged homes, and so we do have a scholarship program, and we are delivering hundreds of sessions that are facilitated through our scholarship programs to children and adolescents at the clinic. So that's one piece where Macquarie University is contributing. The high quality teaching, though, is also forms a centerpiece of the Equity Consortium that I'll talk about in a moment. And I'm also situating our work, I think, within the National School Reform Agreement, which in 2018 identified 8 national reforms that are being implemented over the following 5 years. And one of those pieces is around reviewing the pathways of senior secondary students into work and further education and training. So in terms of this Equity Consortium that we've mentioned a couple of times now, this is a relatively big collaboration between Macquarie, UTS and UNSW. It's a collaborative work with 7 disadvantaged high schools. And at Macquarie, the Widening Participation Unit has been very active in pushing towards running a pilot, which is a really beautiful piece of work that allows us to use the learnings from that pilot to roll out over the following 5 years our literacy piece. So within that collaboration across the 3 universities, we're actually working with year 7s, year 8s and year 9s. And here at Macquarie, we get to work with the year 7s. So over the duration of this collaboration, we'll be working with approximately 700 students, even though I think it's hard to say, it could be more or less. And the goals that we have is really to improve literacy. And within literacy, we are working on improving the ability to comprehend written texts. And the bigger aim here is to reduce the gap between expectations and aspirations of the students that are partaking, and also the teachers that are partaking in this piece. And so ultimately, we are wanting to increase opportunities for disadvantaged students. There has been a lot of work within the Equity Consortium, and at our end, this has been led by Janet Dutton from the School of Education, and there are leaders at the other universities who have made these contributions and filtered out these main concepts against which the project is pitted. And so one of those pieces is really that there's an expectation aspiration gap. And so what that actually means is that there's you know, I think we can all relate to this, but there's often a difference between what we aspire to achieve, what we want to be achieving, and then what we think we might achieve. And that gap is mediated essentially by a disadvantage. There's also a larger gap for our students from more disadvantaged background, and those students are also often at the part of the continuum in terms of achievement that is lower. And we saw earlier maybe some of those reasons where capacity at the schools isn't maybe as it is in some of the more advantaged schools. And so what the second part of, and so what the consortium is working towards is to narrow that gap. There's also an important concept around the choice and decision making that when students and their families are thinking about higher education. And so choice and the decision making are incredibly complex processes that are, you know, captured across many dimensions. And there's a couple of differences that have been made in the scientific literature. And one of those differences is around what kind of information those choices and decision makings are based on. So there is, for example, official information. This is often the kind of information that's disseminated by the universities themselves. And then there is the kind of information that people use that comes from very different sources. So from social networks, these might be rich narratives. And it seems that there is a bit of a division between who uses what information. And so it seems that, or the literature indicates that people from higher SES backgrounds may be more drawn towards that more official information, whereas others might be drawn more towards those richer narratives that come from known people that are known to them. So this might be family or teachers and so on. And so this really indicates where are the points that we can influence to kind of create more choice and contribute to that complex decision-making process. And so the third part of this concept is around something that ended up being called imagined futures. And it's really about the idea that we envisage a range of possibilities for our futures. We all do this. And there is some data indicating that that there's a relationship between educational outcomes and positive imagined futures in students from disadvantaged homes. And in fact, there are actually some studies that show that working on and coaching around imagining these different futures can help with maintaining motivation and persisting through education. And so this is really where the work is situated. We have written a piece for our year sevens, which will coach and work around these imagined futures for themselves. And so those imagined futures will come to play in the literacy piece. And this literacy piece is part of a teacher professional learning, which has been developed by Dr. Danielle Kohlenbrander. And I think Danielle is actually here. So any questions about this professional learning, are best addressed to her. But Danielle has expertise in both the science of reading comprehension, but also implementing those learnings into schools, where Danielle has written a research-based professional learning, which has previously been trialed at the Macquarie University Reading Clinic in different professional learnings. And so what Danielle has written are strategies that the teachers are learning to teach their students to increase very rich interactions with texts. And that's done through dialogue, that's done through a lot of talking together. And so students are learning to build on their existing knowledge, then identify and repair gaps in their understanding to increase their ability to identify, but then also fix those moments when understanding is not being established. They will formulate and answer complex questions to really engage with that text and to create and analyze and evaluate information text. And so all of this is based on the fact that when initial contact was made with principals at schools that are participating, they mentioned reading comprehension as their #1 topic that they wanted to have more capacity in for their students. And so by providing this this professional learning event, we are hoping to create capacity beyond just this cohort of students that we're working with in this consortium, but way beyond that, because the teachers and the school can carry those learnings into all of their classrooms and even the different subjects that they might be teaching, not just in English. The other really exciting piece of work that's happening here, and I know that Danielle and Carolina and Saya have been talking about this, is to go beyond even this consortium and work around delivering these professional learnings to other schools that the Widening Participation Unit is engaging with, because we think it's an incredibly rich piece. And as I was saying, Danielle has trialed this in previous work, and we've also had extremely high ratings for this or similar piece of work within the Macquarie University Reading Clinic professional learnings. So the work that I've been talking about is really a network of people, and I've just given the little network here out of the consortium that happens at Macquarie. So our little node, I think Carolina really liked my little diagram here, and we've got the Widening Participation Unit up the top. Of course, the Widening Participation Unit has very rich connections to partner schools, very different players within the universities, and rich knowledge from previous projects, and all of this comes to this current piece, which allows us to run this project and integrate all of the learnings from previous work that has happened. Another player is the School of Education. Dr. Janet Dutton and Dr. Kim Wilson are working with us here, and Janet and Kim have previous careers as teachers. They understand in a lot of depth what is happening at schools, what kind of even just the language that people are speaking across those different places with which we're networking is so important, and understanding how to reach this level of engagement and what is really required at the ground, so that we are creating capacity, that we're really adding value with what we are doing here. So I was already saying that a lot of the academic leadership comes from that end of our network. And then from cognitive science in the Reading Clinic, we have Dr. Danielle Kohlenbrander, who I've already mentioned. Danielle's leading the professional development side of things and contributing also to the evaluation of the project. And I think actually today is the second day of the professional development that's run as part of the pilot, which is something that we're actually running as a live streamed offering. And that is great because it's something that allows us not only to reach schools in rural areas, and we've trialed this at the Reading Clinic, but it's also it actually makes some of the organizational side of things much easier. And I should have mentioned, of course, that Carolina is also leading the evaluation of this project and all of the documentation. So I think together we have incredibly rich connections, knowledge and expertise that we bring together. And I also think what has been really important is that we've been able to form an identity through the work that we've done together, and genuinely enjoy the work that we're doing, respecting all of the different expertises that are coming together here. And I think that brings me to the end of what I wanted to talk about.
Thank you very much, Saskia. Yeah, look, I think you made a really good point there at the end about those. One of the richnesses of the network is that different aspects, the different expertise that different people can contribute to it, that any one group working on their own wouldn't be able to carry a project across the line because of those different bits of expertise. I was interested in your the data that you have from Macklin and Pilcher about the, that rather depressing data about the almost 30%. I know you're biased as well, but do you think there are more issues with literacy there, or numeracy, or both? Is there more skew on either side, or?
Yeah, it's probably really hard to compare because there's such different, they're being evaluated in very different ways. But I highly recommend reading their data. It's really rich, especially in the context that the Widening Participation Unit is working in. I can send that through to you guys. There's a lot of they've done a lot of work in actually looking at what the role of disadvantage is playing in the data, and it's it's exactly the way that we fear it is.
As Yonghyun said earlier, it's really useful to have the data to make decisions on. And the other thing, there's a couple of questions about the scholarships for students. You do work with individual students, that's right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have most of our delivery is individualized. So that's part at the Reading Clinic. That's partly because we tend to get to see students who have come to the end of what the schools are able to offer, and so we then working with students who need that highly individualized work with our clinicians. We do a little bit of group work, but it's really hard to deliver this with the social distancing as well, and groups via Zoom are a bit harder to run, even though we have done it. Yeah.
And how many sort of scholarships are given out? How are those supported?
So they do supported through private donors. We have some connections with some foundations, and it differs a lot. We don't, because the money that we're totally dependent on our generous donors. So how many scholarships depends on how many donors we have, and that varies a lot. It even varies through the year. So it's difficult to say. We have run hundreds of sessions, but we have run more at some times than others.
I think that's all the questions we've got. So thank you so much for speaking. It's really interesting. And our last speaker today is Sophie Curtis from the Campus Life area. We've had a few different things that we've planned to collaborate with on this year. It's been a very challenging year. We were going to work with them on UNHCR walk and roadshows work, but both of those have been challenging considering the circumstances of this year. So it's just one of those things that there are always challenges with collaborations. So Sophie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I think, Carolina, are you still okay to drive those slides? Yep, great. Just before we get started, I'm on campus today, so I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which I'm on, the Watamatical clan of the Darug Nation. I certainly pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and emerging, and extend those respects to any Indigenous peoples on our chat today, on our forum today. Thank you as well to the Widening Participation team for having me on. What I've been asked to talk to you about today is a project that we worked on in the first week of September, Indigenous Literacy Week. And really this was a week-long project of events and engagement that came together from an idea that I had earlier in May when I started to learn more about Indigenous Literacy Day. And Indigenous Literacy Day is a national celebration of Indigenous culture, stories, language and literacy, and it's an opportunity to raise awareness of the challenges facing remote Indigenous communities, certainly regarding literacy levels. So as you can see there, in the beginning, my main aim was to raise awareness of the day And then through some research I was doing, I came across the incredible work of the Indigenous Literacy Foundation, or the ILF. And I wanted to put campus life and certainly university in a position where we could help the ILF and the work they do through some fundraising efforts. And they're a community-driven organisation that are dedicated to providing books and literacy programs for Indigenous children in remote communities. And they also publish lots of books in Aboriginal languages and multiple Aboriginal languages around Central Australia and other areas of kind of Western New South Wales and southeastern Queensland. As I started to work through what the week could look like as well, it was really important to provide a platform for Indigenous voices and perspectives on campus, building cultural capacity and certainly promoting Aboriginal authorship, and also talking about the importance of literacy and education outcomes for Indigenous people. And so one of the first things I did is reach out to Widening, which is our Indigenous unit on campus, and begin linking with a staff member there, Sue Pinkenham, on what the week could look like and what my ideas were, and how we were going to start to pull this together, I guess. So in doing that and talking with Sue, it was pretty clear that we needed to put together a working group, and we both had ideas around the different teams and people and colleagues on campus that not only shared a vision around equity in the programs they were already doing, but those who genuinely want to collaborate on this project. And that wasn't just around staff, it was also students as well. Thanks, Carolina. So the working group, as you can see there, campus life, actually, we had quite a lot of staff from lots of areas of campus life. So the Sport and Aquatic Centre, Children's Services, my team in sport development, and a few other areas. So we actually were quite a few of us from campus life in the group, and working alongside Sue, as I mentioned, with Widening. This was a really integral group, and we reached out to Widening participation. We reached out to the library and also workplace diversity and inclusion to start with, as I mentioned, as teams that we believe would be really willing to collaborate and want to be a part of the project, and certainly shared some of our visions around raising awareness and the different things that we wanted to do. It was also really important, if we were going to be engaging with staff and students, that we work in with the Macquarie Indigenous Student Association, which we did, and they became a really key collaborator in the working group. And obviously, in terms of wanting to raise awareness and get things out there, you need to have group marketing from a shared services perspective on campus involved. So we work with group marketing really closely as well across the project. It was also really important to have that working group together to make sure that we could be in multiple places and spaces on campus. Again, in order to engage both cohorts and staff and students, you need to have different perspectives. So some of the key strategies of that working group in the interim, like I said, in the start, was actually identifying, did we have the right people in the group, who was capable of taking on project at that time. It was the first week of September. We were still naturally in that COVID environment. Most people were working from home. We had some people back on campus. So we're trying to make sure that we had the right people in the working group and that everyone could play a different role. The defining of the clear strategies and the outcomes are actually coming from the aims that we originally had, and were they achievable, and were we going to be doing the right things. We had to have a lot of ongoing communication, so we were meeting weekly, I think for about 6 weeks up until the week, maybe even less. I don't think I gave the working group much time, to be honest. But one of the key things there was also sharing that load and leveraging the different networks that we had, and the different places and spaces that we were also working with in conjunction to be involved in this project. Certainly the most defining element and certainly defining strategy for us was engaging the campus community. And again, that was a staff and student space, and how we were going to do that, and how are we going to do it in a way that was reaching those overarching aims and goals that we'd had. And certainly that Widening and Campus Life was sharing as well. And that was shared by the group too, which was fantastic. And naturally, due to the environment, there was some implications and adjustments that we were going to have to make because of COVID, because we didn't know how many people were going to be on campus. Obviously, some people were consuming things online in a Zoom environment still, and we were concerned about, online fatigue and different things. So we had to be really willing and agile to make some adjustments along the way. So what we wound up with, or what we settled with in order to reach all of those aims that I mentioned earlier, is that we had a multitude of events and modalities across the week. In terms of raising awareness of Indigenous Literacy Day, we had lots of events on that day, but then in terms of doing, we actually spread out and across a whole week. So Indigenous Literacy Day is Wednesday the 2nd September, but we wanted to have a week-long celebration in order for there to be more visibility, you know, capture more people and not just be one day, because if you didn't happen to see what was going on. So all of those events were designed to do that, and we talked about the day across all of the different events that we were hosting. In terms of, again, supporting the Indigenous Literacy Foundation through our fundraising, is we had multiple book swap locations, and a book swap is actually a core program of the ILF. But again, we were unsure of how many people would be on campus, and in order for staff and students to still participate and be involved, we actually held multiple across the campus and kind of in all corners. So no matter where you were on campus, it was likely that you would go past a book swap location. The yarning circles and the walking Darug country tours were actually led by our Indigenous Student Association, which gave us that really beautiful Indigenous perspective and the student Indigenous perspective as well. And, you know, having attended the yarning circles and going on one of the walking Darug country tours was fantastic. And that's something that also supported Wilangamuru in how they're promoting an app that they came out with, which is all of the different cultural Darug sites on the campus, which is a really wonderful way for staff and students to get to know the campus and the Darug Nation significance around campus as well. The Indigenous Literacy webinar that we did hold on the Wednesday as well certainly provided a platform for Indigenous voices. It was emceed by one of our Indigenous sports scholars. The panelist was Pro Vice Chancellor of Indigenous Strategy, Dr. Leanne Holt, and Tamika Worrell, who is a Wilangamuru staff member and a PhD candidate whose whose study and a PhD is in Aboriginal authorship and the role of literacy and Aboriginal education outcomes. And certainly building cultural capacity, we felt could be achieved through all the different events and engagement that was happening across the week. And the early learning centre visits there, we asked Auntie Claire Jackson, an Aboriginal, to come on site and attend some of our early learning centres, and she read to the children the book Respect, which is by Aboriginal authors, and talked to them and presented to them as well, which was fantastic. It's always great for us to involve children, I think, on campus when we're doing these types of events and projects together. And certainly in promoting Aboriginal authorship and the importance of literacy and education outcomes, one of our other key goals. Certainly the webinar, we talked about that through Tamika's work and study and Leanne's, but also we had an interview with Auntie Julie Jansen, and Auntie Julie is actually that voice that you hear on the Welcome to Country video, the Macquarie Welcome to Country video. And she's an Aboriginal author and a Darug elder. And we had an interview with her. We talked about her role as an Aboriginal author in her community, the importance of Aboriginal authorship in and the true nature of history and changing colonial history and the different viewpoints of Aboriginal authorship as well. And it was really quite a beautiful and inspirational conversation between herself and Sue, and I was there for part of it as well, in making sure that people had different perspectives around Aboriginal history as well. Some of the high-level outcomes that we had across the week was we did a call to action earlier than the week, and we had over 500 books donated by the Macquarie community, staff, students, departments, all different people reaching out to us. And because of COVID, and as a side note, you have to quarantine a book for 72 hours before someone else is allowed to touch it. So we had all these different rules and restrictions around book swapping. So what we actually did was ask the Macquarie community to donate books, and we actually ended up doing more of a book buy scenario than a book swap, which actually worked really well. So across all those stalls, we raised money for the ILF, and we got to talk about the ILF and Indigenous Literacy Day as well. Over 150 staff and students participated across the week, and that was in the webinars, the Darug country tours, and the yarning circles, which we were really happy about because we had a great mix of staff and students. Through the help of Carolina and Widening participation and the family members of our early learning centres, we actually received a lot of donations of educational resources and some other resources that we are sending out to some of the rural and remote Indigenous communities. And we actually asked the Indigenous Student Association to nominate which community groups they would go to involve them in that process. And also another, it was a high level outcome because it allowed some of the success and certainly allowed us to be in multiple spaces, was the communication strategy and the social media campaigning that we had around the week. It did go longer than 2 weeks, but it was really important that students were seeing very similar and key messages to staff. So we had a mix of formal and informal work there as well around our social media campaigning and communication strategy. I'm conscious of my time a little bit as well, so I just thought I would add in a couple of photos as well. We held the book swap locations, the Sport and Aquatic Centre in the centre at the top there, Wally's Walk was down the bottom, our library on the right-hand side, and at the left was one of our childcare centres. So they had book buys, book swaps out the front of all the early learning centres as well. And our last slide here, happy to answer any questions as well, is some pictures there of Auntie Claire on the left, at Banksia, I believe, at the top there, and Gumnut down the bottom when she came in to read to the children. The walking Darug country tours, some photos in the middle there, walking around the different cultural significant sites on campus, the Bush Tucker Garden, and some of the new artwork there in the arts faculty. And then on the right-hand side there, that's where we held the yarning circles, which was led by the Indigenous Student Association and opened by one of our Indigenous students, Jacob Bell, and that's at the Genoese Pavilion outside of Wallangamaroo. We are looking to build on this event from this year moving into next year. We'll have to see what our restrictions and things like that are on campus, but certainly we feel it'll be part of an ongoing calendar of events moving forward. And having listened to Saskia's presentation just before, I think that's another person and another area that we can be talking to around collaborating and joining our working group moving forward. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I was very interested by the way that, the way you ran the event was actually forced on you in some ways by COVID-19, but actually turned out to be an advantage. And it's great that you're flexible and able to, adapt like that.
Yes. Yeah. We didn't, we knew there was some people on campus, and so we wanted to reach them as well. And obviously there was opportunities to not only raise the profile of Indigenous Literacy and Indigenous Literacy Day, but also Wallangamaroo and the work that they're doing on campus and their staff and students too. And that became really important to us across the week.
Fantastic. I didn't get any other questions. Any other questions from anybody now? Or I think maybe.
I have a question. I was just wondering if the webinar that you recorded with Auntie Julie is available. Is that a recorded webinar?
With Auntie Julie, yes, we did. It's actually on the university YouTube channel, and I can send it out to you directly and so you can filter out to this group if you like. But yes,
that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think Caroline is going to do a wrap up now.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for participating. I'll just put that up because I want to share a big thank you with everybody, and especially our speakers. Sophie, it was wonderful to hear about the ILF event on campus, and glad to hear that it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Saskia, thank you so much for all your research and your eye-opening points there. It shows that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and collectively we can achieve that. And Young, thank you so much for sharing your insights regarding the Northern Sydney district. I mean, this is just as Rob mentioned earlier when he asked his question about this, is this just specific to one region? And it's amazing that, just one little pocket of Sydney has so many issues, let alone the rest of it. So, there's a lot of work to be done, and particularly in response to COVID over the coming years. So thank you again. Thank you for being part of our network, and we are so glad to be part of yours. We hope that you join us at our next one, which will be sometime next year. But for the meantime, excuse me, if anyone has any questions or wants to get in contact with either Widening participation or any of our speakers, please do let us know. I've already got some action points to connect Sophie and Saskia, and also to connect Joanne and Young. So there's a few bits which I'm very glad that you've been able to benefit from this forum. So thank you very much. We hope that you've got a bit of an early mark, that you enjoy the rest of your day. And do keep in contact with us. We will share the presentation, some elements of the presentation via our social media. So stay in touch. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Carolina.